Oi oi, hello and welcome to another GG.CO.UK video. This time, it's not too early, it's never too early. We're talking about the Cheltenham Festival. In this video, I will be looking at 10 Cheltenham Festival favourites in particular races to give my view on whether they deserve their spot in the market and whether they may or may not be a piece of value if I think they deserve to be at the top of the market. Now, there are a couple of races we do have joint favourites, but the 10 races that have been selected will be brought out in chronological order. So we'll be kicking off in that first race for the Cheltenham Festival, the Supreme Novices Hurdle. Bambino Fever was the Cheltenham Champion Bumper winner of 2025. She went on to win at Punchestown too. She now sees herself at the front of the Supreme Novices Hurdle market. Now, look, I'm going to talk about things as they stand at the moment. She is the favourite for this particular race, but she's also favourite for the Mares Novices Hurdle. She's a 4-1 shot for that. We know that Willie Mullins likes to target his horses at the races they are most likely to win. So this could all be a moot point talking about her in this vicinity. However, it's not unknown for Willie Mullins to send the girls against the boys in big races. So should she prove that she's top of the Irish lot in the Novice Hurdle division next season, there's every chance she could end up as a Supreme horse. That said again, Jodie Townend's comments after the Punchestown Bumper victory suggested that she is a horse that will stay further. 2 or 2.5 miles will suit her down to the ground now. Again, a lean and a nod towards the Mares Novices Hurdle in the fact that people say you want to be able to stay to win those races. But we've said time and time again, a Supreme Festival winner is a horse that will stay. We've had loads of horses that have finished within the frame that have gone on to win Gold Cups further down the line. So we just don't know for sure where she's going to end up. I think it's worth looking at her in a similar vein to a couple of recent Mare Champion Bumper winners, Relegate and the late Fiona. Now, I would say she's more of a mould of a Fiona in my opinion. I thought Fiona was going to be one of the next best things in hurdling for the Mares division, but unfortunately she did lose her life. Now, she was recording high RPRs in her bumper sphere. When they then transition into jumping, it doesn't always quite work out. Relegate was a bit of an example of that. But looking at the figures Bambino Fever pulled together in her bumper performances last year, it was 124 RPR just before Cheltenham at the Dublin Racing Festival, 124 at Cheltenham, 129 at Punchestown after, in a race where Jodie Townend said she got there too soon. Looking at Relegate, she posted 126 before Cheltenham in the Dublin Racing Festival, 135 at Cheltenham, and 111 when she was beaten at Punchestown. At least Bambino Fever still has an unblemished record. Fiona, like I say, was probably more of a similar mould. We didn't get to see how good she could have been. 129 prior to Cheltenham, 125 at Cheltenham, so very similar to Bambino Fever. 129 at Punchestown, exactly the same. So look, it is going to take some time to work out where this mare goes next season, or this season and next year at Cheltenham Festival. More than likely she's going to be a Mares Novice Hurdle winner, but there is a chance she comes to the Supreme. She's the head of the market. Does she warrant favouritism in that market? Yes, on potential ability. Champion Bumper winners don't always have the best record going into Supreme. The fact that I think it's more likely she goes to another race, I would have her down as a bad festival favourite to kick things off. Looking at the Arkle now, we've got joint favourites at the top of the market. Very different moulds of horses. We have Lulamba, who didn't win the Triumph Hurdle at Cheltenham, just nabbed by Poneros. They've talked about the rule changes that would have changed. In my eyes, he's pretty much a Triumph Hurdle winner. Went and won at the Punchestown Festival, though, got a good job and got hit the better of Poneros in that battle. Still only a juvenile, though, in terms of last season, and that is juvenile form that's got to be carried through. We've talked in season after season about 5-year-olds going into an Arkle and not necessarily having the best record, although you wouldn't have a whole host of horses that have tried that would be a similar calibre to Lulamba. So I think this horse does deserve to be right near the top of the tree. A decision definitely about where the horse is going to go. I don't know if that has fully been made as yet. We know with the Yard and Constitution Hill and different horses they've got in there, even the Donnellys having lots of horses in the same ownership, I think a decision has to be made as a collective picture within there. They missed the opportunity with Sergino last year, losing his Novice Chase tag in that Wayward Lad at Kempton and then not being able to go and run In an Arkle after that, you wonder if they might try and go for some level of redemption with Lulamba, but I think he deserves to be towards the front of the market. I think he's got a massive chance. Whether the 6-1 about him is any value or not will just completely depend on what Kopek de Board does. Now, he has been cited as going chasing this season. He was a phenomenal winner of the Supreme Novices Hurdle at Cheltenham. I thought his attitude was really impressive there. Punchestown, his attitude, not so much. Now, Willie Mullins has made comments that he was the burliest of all these horses in the parade ring at Punchestown. In hindsight, he thinks he should have got an extra run into him before that Punchestown effort. These are all reasons to potentially forgive the horse, and coming into Cheltenham next year, he could have a very similar prep to what he did this time in terms of timing with the Dublin Racing Festival and Cheltenham. And he does look like a horse that probably is going to make into a really good chaser. Can be quite headstrong. There's been headgear applied to him at times, so there are small grey areas around that, and there could be some depth behind in this market. So look, either one of those horses, if the other one goes hurdling, means the 6-1 about them looks like a generous price. If you think about playing the pair, it's going to pay 5 to 2. It will cost you £2 at 6-1 each to return 7 if one of those horses wins. If you think if they both got there, getting paid 5 to 2 for one of these two horses to win would probably look like a very good bet. The fact they're on opposite sides of the sea as well means that we're not going to find out the pecking order until Cheltenham. So I'd probably look at it more in that sort of sense. Would I take 5 to 2 about either Kopek de Board or Lulamba winning the Arkle? I won't be rushing out to bet it, but I certainly wouldn't be putting people off, would be my opinion. The Mares Hurdle sees Lossiemouth, the reigning champion, at the top of the market. She is a phenomenal mare. Now, there was talk last season about whether they should roll the dice and stick her in a champion hurdle. That was a phenomenal champion hurdle last year with Constitution Hill, Brighter Days Ahead, Stateman, Golden Ace, lots of good horses in there. And obviously there were some unfortunate events in that race that meant that Golden Ace took the prize. People may be arguing that if Lossiemouth had gone there, she may have won. But she won the Mares Hurdle, the race that Willie Mullins wanted to target with her. She then went and won at Aintree over the same trip, 2.5 miles, when Constitution Hill came down. I still think Lossiemouth would have won that race. Then she was ended up at Punchestown, but not declared, where Willie Mullins had already said after Aintree that Stateman would be going for that champion hurdle there. Now, I guess they've got a big decision to make this season in terms of there's a mare's allowance. It depends what happens with lots of our horses in the division. And I think that's where I sit with Lossiemouth as favourite for a mare's hurdle. There were plenty of people last season that would have been on Brighter Days Ahead at decent prices for the mare's hurdle, but ultimately the champion hurdle was the route that she went down. Lossiemouth, things may fall into place where the champion hurdle is the route that she may go down. But as it stands at the time of recording, Willie Mullins, as far as I'm concerned, will be aiming all of his horses at the races he thinks they've got the best chance of winning. Lossiemouth has her best chance of winning again at the Cheltenham Festival in the Mares Hurdle, regardless of the depth of the field that goes in the Champion Hurdle. I think it's the right trip for her. There is potential competition in the Champion Hurdle, but you know that there could be changes and anything can happen in horse racing and especially in that Champion Hurdle market. So look, 9-4 about Lossiemouth may look generous on the day. You're basically betting 9-4 whether she runs in the race as opposed to her being that price on, I guess, not even merit, but the opposite of that, on the practicality that she may have other options. I personally wouldn't want to be holding a bet on her for the Mares Hurdle as a big lumpy single. However, people that are putting the Dreamweavers on this far out, she potentially is only going to get shorter, but there is also a chance where her price doesn't collapse too far too soon. So look, definitely warrants favouritism. I touched on Kopek de Board and Lulamba being 5-2 for one of those two to win an Arkle. That feels like a much better proposition than Lossiemouth at 9-4 for a mare's when potentially she may not end up in the race. Deserving favourite, 9-4 is not for me. The New Lion finds himself as champion hurdle favourite. This is a horse that divided opinions last season right up until the Cheltenham Festival, where it was a three-way go at the last hurdle between the New Lion, the Yellow Clay and Final Demand, and the best horse on the day won. I actually think that the New Lion won even better than the winning margin would suggest, given the fact that he was pushed to come to a position which wouldn't have necessarily been ideal. There's been lots of renewals in the Bear in Bingham, the Gallaghers, the Neptune, whatever you want to call it, the 2 mile 5 furlong novices hurdle, where as you turn in, you really do want to try and be on that inside rail. As I say, the three of them jumped to the last all together, which is what I was hoping for. I thought Final Demand wouldn't have shown the speed, which he didn't. I did think that the Yellow K would be good enough to go and win the race, for all that I didn't think he was a necessary top grade 1 horse, but the New Lion was much better than him on the day. 159 was the RPR that he secured winning that race. It's a decent RPR. It's a decent race for horses that come back to 2 miles, whether they go chasing or whether they go hurdling. Hurdling is going to be the route for the New Lion. We know that JP McManus has targeted this race many times in the past. I suppose my question mark around him to some degree is his best form is around the middle trip. Yes, he does show some speed, but did he just beat a boat in Final Demand? And is the Yellow Clay really a very good grade 1 yardstick? We're going to have to find that out next season. For me, he needs to improve at least £10 or more to be a champion hurdle winner. I do consider the fact that I was negative about him going into the Cheltenham Festival, that I may still have a little bit of that bear on my back. But we're going to have to see how he gets campaigned this season. It is Dan Skelton that trains this horse, rather than it being your typical Nicky Henderson champion hurdler. And the opportunities for the New Lion to be tested on this side of the sea, sometimes and often, are far and few between. The Fighting Fifth can sometimes draw an Irish runner. The Christmas Hurdle can occasionally attract an Irish runner. But I wonder if there's a chance that Dan Skelton may just test the New Lion on the other side of the sea. Sometimes there's no reason to do that. Why would you put pressure on a horse before they get to the big day? But I don't know. I feel like this isn't going to be a traditional British trained champion hurdle favourite, and I'm all for that. I think if he gets enough experience against really good horses, he could win a champion hurdle. I don't want to see him turn into a horse like the new one, where his most competitive experiences are at the Cheltenham Festival and time doesn't wait for him. In the fact I mean with that, if he had have had more competitive races prior, maybe he would have been enough to go and win a champion hurdle. And I think the New Lion's just that. I think he needs to be pushed. I don't know whether he will be on this side of the sea. Does he warrant champion hurdle favouritism? I'd probably say yes at this stage. It was a bit of a murky market last year in the fact we had some of the best horses possibly going there and it didn't quite plan out. A similar thing happened years ago when we had Apples Jade, Lorena, Bouverdere and Espoir de Lan stomped in that champion hurdle. Now, I feel a little bit like the New Lion could be another Espoir de Lan in the fact that there are some big names up there, some very good grade 1 2-mile hurdlers, but it isn't the strongest division in its entirety. Horses like Lossiemouth may not even be in there in competition. If she was, I think she'd be a massive threat, but I don't think he would need to improve quite as much to beat a Lossiemouth as it would take to win a traditional champion hurdle. Therefore, there's every reason to think the New Lion could win a champion hurdle. Again, would I really want to be playing at the price that he is right now, knowing that by the time it gets all the way through to March, given the makeup and who may be going in the race or who may not, will he really be much shorter than he is now? And we will have had the stack of evidence. Yes, he'll probably be shorter, but I think I'd rather wait to the day to find out exactly who's running and how he's performed going into open company. The Brown Advisory Novices Chase sees Final Demand as a 3-1 ante-post favourite. That is incredibly short considering we're so far out from the Cheltenham Festival. However, he was a very good third in the bar in Bingham, the Gallagher's Novices Hurdle behind the New Lion for a horse that potentially may have been better suited to going and running in something like an Albert Bartlett. Now, you think of another horse from the yard, Monkfish, who was about a 10-1 shot ante-post for this particular race. There was some depth around him. Yes, he had his problems on the day, jumped like a snooker table, but still got the job done. Final Demand reminds me a lot of a horse like Monkfish. Now, I actually think he's got a bit more speed and potentially he's got a little bit more class. What he did at Punchestown, having made all over 2.5 miles, was nothing short of impressive. I do think that the Cheltenham Festival race, where he was sent off as favourite, is worth paying attention to. Market support for Willie Munnings novice is always worth noting. Yes, it didn't pan out on the day. And yes, I may have knocked the Yellow Clay slightly when talking about the New Lion, but I do think that they are good horses. I expected him to be there near the last, which he was, and I did expect that the other horses may have a bit more speed. But when you're talking about a Brown Advisory Novice Chase, he is going to have the stamina in abundance to go really well in a race like that. The 2.5 mile race at Punchestown shows the tactical speed he's got. His race prior at the Dublin Racing Festival shows the class and engine that this horse has got. He was relatively inexperienced going into Cheltenham. They're going to be able to get a lot of work into this 6-year-old. He'll be turning 7 next year. and I suspect that Final Demand is going to be one of the shorter priced ante-post favourites that will land the spoils at Cheltenham in March. 3 to 1 about him may seem too short for many people to be playing ante-post. I think this is a horse who will almost certainly go off odds on for the Brown Advisory Novices Chase, should he get there. And that would be the only concern that I'd have with this horse. Nothing to do with his ability, nothing to do with wanting to see how he jumps a fence in public. I just think it's a case of him getting there injury-free. So yes, there's risk attached with a horse like him, but he deserves to be favourite. And I don't think 3 to 1 about him is too short for all that it may look like that in hindsight and retrospect compared to other Brown Advisory Novice Chase winners this far out. The Queen Mother Champion Chase is another race that sees joint favourites at the head of the market on the best prices available. Last season's Champion Chase winner, Marine Nationale, and Seven Barrows novice chaser from last season, Sergino, who didn't even make the Cheltenham Festival. Now, I want to touch on that about Sergino before we go any further, in the fact that he is not a novice anymore because he lost that status, but he's only had a small amount of experience over fences in public, and of course had an issue which saw him miss the back end of last season. Of course, risks attached with a horse like that, where he battered Ballyburn on a terms where he was getting some weight. The track was probably going to suit him more than it would Ballyburn, including the ground. He did still notch up a 166 RPR that day, but it still has to be questioned how strong that form will stand up to be over the test of time. But no doubt Sergino is a phenomenal horse. Now, talking about that 166 RPR from Sergino as a novice with very limited experience, Marine Nationale won the Queen Mother Champion Chase, posting a 173 RPR. That was a career high. I think before that, 163 was the highest the horse had posted. So within the realms of what Sergino's achieved already and what Marine Nationale had prior to his Champion Chase victory, you'd say that Sergino's probably on a steeper upward trajectory and might be the stronger of the two in terms of an outright ante-post proposition. Now, Marine Nationale ran really well at Punchestown after, beat a lot of the same faces, but did beat a horse Factor File who was very good in the Ryanair, didn't really shine on the day at Punchestown. Of course, that Champion Chase that he won as well, there was horses that fell at the last. John Bond didn't really get the chance to show his true ability in the race. There are no weak Champion Chase winners, but we know there's a bit of a curse and a hoodoo around the favourites for it. Maybe the stars just aligned for Marine Nationale to win it last year. But I did see some progression with Marine Nationale in the early stages of last season, to expect him to run well in the spring. He did just that. There is a chance that he can continue his upward trajectory because I don't think he's finished improving just yet. But I do think that Sergino, if he manages to keep himself sound this season, would be a more likely winner of the Champion Chase. With the prices they are ante-post and the fact that they're joint favourites, Marine Nationale himself has had potential breathing issues. There are little grey areas around both these horses. So again, I don't know whether I'd be looking at playing the pair for a Champion Chase because it is a race where we do get some upsets. I don't know if I want to be bullish and side with one of the horses, but if I had to pick which of the two I would suggest is the better favourite, I would just about argue that Sergino is. But I would say that it's so fractional that if you could ask 50 people, 25 would say Marine Nationale, 25 may say Sergino, and that's why they're the joint favourites that they currently are. Would not be a race that I'd be interested in playing ante-post at this stage, but it is a race I'm very excited for all the same. Factor File heads the market for the Ryanair Chase, the race he won last season. And it's a race that he really blew apart. He feels an awful lot like your Indussus or your Alahos, these real good, speedy horses who have the ability to go and mix it at 2 miles, potentially could go out in trip. He is, of course, a Brown Advisory Novices Chase winner. Saying about him mixing it in different trips, though, his Punchestown effort was disappointing. He was sent off favourite when dropped back to 2 miles, but he has always looked a horse that would be pushing Ryanair distances or maybe beyond as a Gold Cup horse. Now, connections do have, I know the way you're thinking for a Gold Cup horse. You think with Factor File now turning from 8 to 9 into next season, that he is likely to stay at the middle trip for the Ryanair Chase. He does look like he's going to be very hard to beat. It's a race that never attracts the strongest field. It would be the weaker of the 3 big Grade 1 Champion Chases. As far as I'm concerned, you've got the 2 miles of the Champion Chase and you've got the 3 miles too of the Gold Cup. And I do think that it is factor files to lose. Look, he's a horse that has thrown in some bad jumps. He's a horse that potentially has looked beatable on multiple occasions, but he's also a horse that on his day looks unbeatable. He's one that I wouldn't want to be taken on in a Ryanair market, but a Ryanair market is a race that I would typically leave till nearer the time. There's only so short some of these horses go, so I think factor file warrants favouritism for the race, but at this stage, I would be quite happy to leave him alone. The Stayers Hurdle has long been seen as a relatively weak championship race. Teahupoo managed to land the spoils a couple of years ago after getting beaten in the race the year prior, something that people said isn't a positive coming forward to the race the season after. Of course, he was beaten last season too by owner-mate Bob Ollinger. Now, it wasn't as much of a shock as plenty of people may have thought on prices. Some good judges fancied the horse to win on the day. Rachel Blackmore put Bob Ollinger up as their charity bet for the week, and we know what Bob Ollinger's record is at the Cheltenham Festival. But he is a maturing horse. Teahupoo may be another horse that's not really getting any younger, but he is 8 turning 9 going into the Stayers Hurdle. He ran with great credit in the race last year. He's one of a few Jack Kennedy mounts where I'm not 1,000,000% sure that Jack was 100% fit to ride to his absolute optimum at the festival. Take nothing away from Bob Ollinger, but I think Teahupoo lost nothing in defeat. And of course, what he did at Punchestown after shows the absolute calibre that this horse is. He's a very good horse. They've got their new training method with him to let him go running a Hatton's Grace, keep him fresh for Cheltenham, and it has been working. I feel like there would be a little bit to work on from last year, but the younger horses that we were expecting to be progressive and maybe challenge for his title last year just were not there. So you're having to wait for a new kid on the block to potentially do that. You look at some of the Albert Bartler horses from last year and you just don't really see your classic Stayers Hurdle contender in there. And I say your classic Stayers Hurdle contender, you get lots of horses that may go chasing that drop back to go over hurdles, but I think Teahupoo does deserve to be favourite. The bookmakers will be a little bit scared from a couple of years ago when they put him too big a price. Last season he was short all the way through to the festival. He would definitely be a horse that I'd want on side nearer the time, but I do think with his racing style in terms of the Hatton's Grace and waiting until the festival, that his price will probably hold up till nearer the time. I think he went off 7-4 for the race last year, but he was available about 5-2 just a couple of weeks before. That is around the time that I'd want to be back in Teahupoo, much closer to the event, probably non-runner money back, and you get to see what the competition is. He will never be a horse that goes off short for a Stayers Hurdle, but he absolutely warrants favouritism. Moving on to the Friday now, and it's Dino Blue heading the market for the Mare's Chase, a race she won last year under a very good tactical ride from Mark Walsh. I talked about this horse quite a lot in previews, suggesting that Mark Walsh will have learned a lot from the previous year. When the horse was beaten by Limerick Lace, and I just think the other horse got first run, he hugged that rail this year. Allegory Devassi did come down at the last flight, but Dino Blue had the race covered as far as I'm concerned, and that was with carrying the £5 penalty. She was carrying 11 stone 7. Allegory Devassi was 11 stone 2. Now this year, we're going to see her go for the race again as far as I'm concerned, and touch wood that she stays sound. Brighter days ahead will potentially be coming in this race too. Now, she's been marred from the fact that she was beaten in that Mare's Novice Hurdle and she was beaten in the Champion Hurdle last year, but she has lots of ability and she's a horse that is going to impress through this season and probably shorten up in the market. So the top price at the moment for Dino Blue, sitting around a 7-2 shot, is semi-tempting, but it is a price I think could potentially hold up. She is a horse that through the season may go and mix it against the boys back at 2 Mile like she did last season. So again, she may see defeat before Cheltenham, and then I think she may shorten up a bit nearer the time. I think Dino Blue does deserve to be favourite for the Mare's Chase, and at this stage I would say that she will win the Mare's Chase. Obviously I say will win, it's my opinion of what I think could potentially pan out. But there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. I think this market could move about quite a bit, and I do think that it's probably worth holding on and holding fire before striking a bet on her to regain her title. I think she is the one to beat, as I've said. There are question marks about brighter days ahead for Cheltenham, but there are opportunities for her to come over as a chaser. Gordon Elliott quite happily sends his horses over to this side of the sea early on to get some experience. Should she come and basically put it's not even myth, but put the history of Cheltenham defeats behind her, even if it is in a lower class race, then that's going to move her towards the front of the market. And I think it'll be a fascinating clash between the two of those. my money would still be on Dino Blue. But again, a lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. Final race we'll be covering and the blue ribbon event of the Cheltenham Festival. The Gold Cup sees I Know The Way You're Thinking as market leader. Now, a horse that potentially wasn't even going to run in the Gold Cup last season, big eye catcher at the Dublin Racing Festival and looked like the most likely horse to give Galopin Des Champs something to think about. I myself did not see I Know The Way You're Thinking being a horse that could beat Galopin Des Champs on the day. I thought he looked like the right horse to be betting in them without markets. And I even think on the day, I thought Galopin Des Champs would still win. I Know The Way You're Thinking scooted past him on that home turn. And even up to the line, he looked like he had loads of energy left. He really has taken the mantle from Galopin Des Champs, who is an unbelievable horse and the chief rival and the chief threat to I Know The Way You're Thinking next year. But of course, he's not getting any younger. We know how difficult it can be to try and regain a title rather than retain a title. And a Gold Cup can leave its mark on some of these horses. How Galopin Des Champs' campaign this season, I don't know. There are big targets prior that he could go and win, but I know that I Know The Way You're Thinking will be targeted with the Gold Cup in mind. As I say, last year, maybe a bit of pressure was taken off the horse in the fact that they weren't 100% sure if they were going to go into the Gold Cup or not. But this time round now, being trained specifically for the race, maybe there'll be some difference through the season. I couldn't really suggest that the price about the horse ante-post for a Gold Cup, the blue ribbon event, is really worth taking. It's a market that shapes as we get closer to the event, more so than some of the other races. Prices will fluctuate quite a bit. And he is the type of horse to go and get beaten a couple of times before he comes to Cheltenham, which is where his main day will be. So look, absolutely warrants favouritism. Any horse that can beat Galopin Des Champs on a go-in day for Galopin Des Champs is far and few between. No other horse has been able to do that. I know Bob Bollinger did when Galopin Des Champs fell, but he had him beat. Galopin Des Champs still ran a phenomenal race in that Gold Cup, but I Know The Way You're Thinking was simply just better. And there's no reason to believe that he won't be the best horse in the race again this year. Absolutely warrants favouritism. As I say, his price may take a bit of a walk through the season, but at the same time, if you were sticking some multiples on at the start of the season, he's a name that needs to be right at the very top of the list. That wraps up the Cheltenham Festival favourites. We've looked at 10 races there. There's a couple of races with joint favourites, and there's a couple of races where we don't definitely know that is going to be the final target for the current favourite. It's good to be talking about Cheltenham again. There is some exciting Cheltenham related and National Hunt season content coming up on the GG channel. So if you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Big thank you to our joiners. They help us create these types of content. And just a big thanks to any of you out there that take the time to watch these videos. We really do appreciate the support. If you could drop a like on the video, we'd appreciate that too. If you could drop a prediction below in the comments of horses you think will win at the Cheltenham Festival that maybe have or haven't even been mentioned, I'd really appreciate that, and I'll go through all the comments as well. But for now, that wraps up the Cheltenham content, and we will see you again very soon.